Have you ever wanted something so badly that your mind began to create it out of thin air? That desperate desire that blurs the line between reality and imagination. In 1931, during the darkest days of the Great Depression, an entire town fell victim to a collective delusion so powerful that it claimed 17 lives and left an enduring mystery that remained unsolved for nearly a century. Before you continue watching, comment where you're from and subscribe to help our channel continue bringing these hidden historical horrors to light. The township of Millfield, Ohio, had always been unremarkable. A small coal mining community nestled in the Appalachian foothills of Athens County. Like countless other American towns during the economic collapse of the early 1930s, Millfield was suffering. The mines were producing less, wages were cut, and families who had lived there for generations were facing the unthinkable prospect of starvation. It was against this backdrop of desperation that the Blackwood triplets arrived in town on an unusually warm October morning. Eleanor, Evelyn, and Elizabeth Blackwood were identical in every way. Tall, slender women with copper-red hair and unnervingly pale blue eyes that seemed to reflect light rather than absorb it. They dressed identically in tailored black dresses with high collars, their hair pulled back in severe buns, and they spoke with the refined accents of wealthy East Coast society. The sisters took a room at the Millfield Inn, paying 3 months' rent in advance, with crisp new bills. This alone was enough to cause a stir in town. Who were these women? Where had they come from? And most importantly, what business brought them to a dying coal town in the midst of the Depression? The answers came 2 days later when advertisements appeared throughout Millfield announcing an exclusive auction for what was described as the most magnificent estate in all of Ohio. According to the flyers, which featured an artist's detailed rendering of a sprawling Victorian mansion set on hundreds of acres of pristine woodland, the property had belonged to an unnamed industrial magnate who had recently died without heirs. The Blackwood sisters, as representatives of a prestigious Boston auction house, had been tasked with selling the property to a worthy buyer. Local newspaper editor James Harrington was the first to question the sisters' claims. In his own recounting of events, preserved in a journal discovered decades later, "I've lived in Athens County my entire life, 47 years this December, and I've never heard of any mansion of the sort these women describe. I confronted the eldest, though it's impossible to tell which is which, at the diner this morning. I asked her directly where this supposed property was located. She smiled at me in a way that made my skin crawl and said, 'Mr. Harrington, surely a man of your standing in the community understands the need for discretion. The estate's location must remain confidential until the auction to prevent unwanted visitors and vandalism. We can only say it lies within 20 miles of Millfield. All qualified buyers will be provided transportation to the viewing.'" Harrington remained suspicious, but his was a lone voice of doubt in a sea of excitement. The town, desperate for any distraction from their daily struggles, embraced the mystery of the hidden mansion. The Blackwood sisters fed this fascination, appearing around town and sharing tantalizing details about the property. Crystal chandeliers imported from France, marble fireplaces in every room, a library containing first editions of priceless literary works, and gardens designed by the same landscape architect who'd worked on the grounds of the White House. To qualify as a potential buyer, interested parties needed to submit an application and a good faith deposit of $100, an astronomical sum in 1931. Despite this, within a week, the sisters had collected deposits from 12 of Millfield's wealthier citizens, including the bank manager, the mine owner, and several local businessmen. On October 17th, the 12 approved buyers gathered at the Millfield Inn at dawn. They were to be transported to the estate for a private viewing before the auction. The sisters had arranged for 3 automobiles to take the group. Each sister would lead one car of buyers to the property, traveling separately for security reasons. What happened next is pieced together from the accounts of survivors, police reports, and courthouse testimony. The convoy of cars left Millfield heading west along rural county roads. After approximately an hour of driving, with each car taking increasingly isolated dirt paths, the vehicles became separated. Buyers would later report that their particular Blackwood sister insisted they had taken a shortcut after seeing the other cars make a wrong turn. By mid-morning, the 12 buyers found themselves in 3 separate locations, each miles from the others, each led by a single Blackwood sister who insisted they were very close to the mansion. As noon approached, the weather changed dramatically. A dense fog descended, reducing visibility to mere feet. The temperature dropped sharply and an unseasonable frost began to form on the windows of the automobiles. Martin Wheeler, the town doctor and one of the buyers in Eleanor Blackwood's car, provided this account. "We had been driving for over 3 hours, far longer than the short trip the sisters had promised. The roads became narrower, then turned to mere trails through dense forest I didn't recognize, though I've hunted these woods all my life. When the fog came, Eleanor insisted we continue on foot, claiming the estate was just beyond the tree line. The 4 of us, myself, Eleanor, Bernard from the pharmacy, and William Taft, the schoolteacher, abandoned the car and followed her into the woods. The fog was unnatural. I've never seen anything like it. Thick as cotton and cold as ice. We could barely see 3 feet ahead, and sounds seemed to both dampen and distort. Eleanor walked briskly, always just at the edge of visibility, urging us forward with promises that we were almost there. After 20 minutes of walking, Bernard complained of feeling disoriented. He stopped, saying he needed to catch his breath. Eleanor continued forward with William and me. When I looked back moments later, Bernard was gone. Just gone. No sound, no cry for help. The fog had swallowed him. Similar accounts came from the other groups. In each, buyers reported being led deeper into unfamiliar woods. The Blackwood sister always staying just ahead, always promising they were almost there. And in each group, people began to vanish into the fog. By nightfall, only 5 of the original 12 buyers had managed to find their way back to Millfield. Each came alone, on foot, emerging from different directions, all in states of severe hypothermia and confusion. None of the Blackwood sisters returned. A search party was organized immediately, but the remaining 7 buyers were never found alive. Over the next 3 days, as the search expanded, only 3 bodies were recovered. Each was found in a different location, miles apart, each dead from exposure. The remaining 4 buyers and the Blackwood triplets had vanished without a trace. The investigation that followed revealed disturbing details. No Boston auction house had any record of employing the Blackwood sisters. The crisp new bills they had used to pay for their room were counterfeit, though of such high quality that they had initially fooled even the bank. Most disturbingly, the deposit money collected from the buyers, totaling $1,200, equivalent to over $23,000 today, was missing from the sisters' room at the inn, along with all their belongings. It appeared to be an elaborate confidence scheme that had gone horribly wrong. The sheriff's official conclusion was that the sisters had intended to swindle the town's wealthier citizens and flee, but had become lost in the unexpected fog and perished in the woods alongside their victims. The case was filed as fraud resulting in manslaughter, and with no suspects to pursue, it was eventually closed. But the mystery of what really happened that day continued to haunt Millfield for decades. The 4 missing buyers and the Blackwood sisters were never found. The surviving buyers could never agree on where they had been taken, each describing completely different landscapes and directions of travel, despite all having started from the same location. And strangest of all, several reported the same experience. Moments before their companions vanished into the fog, they claimed to have glimpsed in the distance the silhouette of a grand Victorian mansion, exactly matching the one from the auction flyer. The case might have remained just another Depression-era tragedy, one of many from that desperate time, if not for what happened 60 years later, in 1991. Construction workers breaking ground for a new development on the outskirts of what had once been Millfield made a startling discovery. While excavating the foundation, they uncovered a sealed underground chamber. Inside were 7 skeletons arranged in a perfect circle. In the center of the circle lay a set of architectural plans, detailed blueprints for a Victorian mansion identical to the one described in the Blackwood sisters' auction notices. Forensic analysis would later confirm these remains belonged to the 4 missing buyers and 3 women of identical height and build, presumed to be the Blackwood triplets. Carbon dating placed the time of death around 1931. But the chamber itself presented an impossibility. The concrete structure showed no signs of having been built around the bodies. Rather, it appeared as if the chamber had been constructed first, then sealed, with no entrance or exit. As if the 7 individuals had somehow materialized inside a solid concrete room. The case was reopened, and investigators began to piece together a theory so disturbing that initial reports were suppressed for years. Only through Freedom of Information Act requests decades later did the full investigation become public. According to police records, in the weeks before their arrival in Millfield, 3 identical women matching the Blackwoods' description had appeared in 7 other towns across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. In each location, they had collected deposits for various non-existent properties or business opportunities before disappearing. But Millfield was different. It was the only town where people had died. Further investigation revealed something even more chilling. In each of the 7 previous towns, the sisters had used different names but always remained identical triplets. And in each town, they had shown potential marks drawings or photographs of properties that, while different in appearance, all contained the exact same structural elements as the Millfield mansion. A central circular room with 7 doors, a spiral staircase that ascended 3 floors, and peculiar triangular windows in the attic. The most disturbing evidence came from the personal effects found with the skeletons in the underground chamber. Each of the 7 bodies wore an identical ring bearing an unusual symbol, a triangle containing an inverted house design. Analysis of the symbol led investigators to obscure texts on sympathetic architecture, a pseudo-scientific occult belief that structures built in specific geometric patterns could create resonances between different planes of existence. Among the papers found in the chamber was a journal, mostly destroyed by time and moisture, but with several legible passages. One read, "The confluence approaches. 7 anchors at 7 points, 3 guides to shape the passage. The house must be built first in the mind, then in the shared dream, before it can manifest in the between space. Once the foundation is laid with willing sacrifice, the doors will open in both directions." Another, in different handwriting, "We are so close now. The Millfield subjects show the strongest resonance yet. Their desperation makes them more susceptible to the suggestion. They can already see the outline of the house when properly guided. E says 2 more gatherings should generate sufficient belief energy for complete manifestation." The final entry in yet another hand. "Something has gone wrong. The fog was not our doing. Something else is here, using our framework but with different intent. It knows us now. It sees through us. The barriers between here and there are too thin. We cannot control what comes through." God forgive us, we cannot control what comes through. The official investigation concluded that the Blackwood sisters had been part of an occult group attempting some form of mass hypnosis or psychological manipulation. The theory suggested they had induced their victims into a shared hallucinatory state that somehow led to their deaths, possibly as part of a group suicide. The case was once again closed, the deaths ruled as cult-related homicides. But this explanation satisfied few who knew the details. Too many questions remained unanswered. How had 7 people become sealed in a concrete chamber that had no entrance? Why had the same 3 women appeared in multiple towns, always using the same confidence scheme centered around non-existent properties? And most troubling of all, why had similar cases involving identical triplet women and missing persons been reported in the same region every 30 years since 1871? The mystery deepened in 2021, exactly 30 years after the chamber's discovery and 90 years after the original incident. 3 women checked into the Athens Plaza Hotel, 20 miles from the former site of Millfield. They were identical triplets, with copper-red hair and pale blue eyes. They paid for their room with crisp new bills and inquired about properties for sale in the area. By the time police responded to the tip from the hotel manager who had read about the historical case, the women had vanished. Left behind in their room was a single item, a beautifully rendered architectural drawing of a Victorian mansion, identical in every detail to the one from 1931. But this time, the drawing showed people inside the house, 7 figures seated in a circular room, their faces detailed enough to be recognizable as the victims from 1931. And looking out from 3 triangular attic windows, 3 identical women with copper-red hair, their pale eyes seeming to follow the viewer regardless of angle. Most disturbing of all was the notation at the bottom of the drawing, in elegant script: "Construction continues." Next viewing, Randolph County, West Virginia, October 17, 2022. Police investigators rushed to the location specified, a remote wooded area near the town of Elkins. There they discovered freshly turned earth in a perfect circle, 50 feet in diameter. At the center of the circle stood a single concrete post, reminiscent of a cornerstone. Etched into its surface was an image of a house and the words, "The foundations are laid. The walls rise in dreams. The doors open both ways. All are welcome who can see." Ground-penetrating radar revealed no underground structures or bodies at the site. But local residents reported something unusual. On foggy mornings when the light hits just right, the outline of an enormous Victorian mansion seems to shimmer in the air above the concrete post. Those who have seen it describe it as both there and not there, visible only from certain angles, like a reflection on water that vanishes when viewed directly. The case remains open. The Blackwood Triplets, if that was ever their real name, have never been identified or apprehended. Every 30 years, like clockwork, they seem to reappear, leaving behind only questions and fear. And somewhere, perhaps in a place between reality and imagination, a house that never existed continues to be built, room by room, life by life, waiting for new visitors to step through its doors. Detective Marcus Sullivan, who has led the investigation since 2012, offered this disturbing theory in a confidential report. "We've been looking at this all wrong. We assumed the Blackwoods were con artists who evolved into cult leaders. But what if it's the house that's the constant? What if the house is somehow using the triplets rather than the other way around? In every instance, the house is described the same way, a structure that seems to exist at the edge of perception, visible but intangible, almost there. What if that's exactly what it is, a house trying to fully manifest in our reality?" Sullivan's report was buried in classified files until a FOIA request in 2023 brought it to light. By then, Sullivan had resigned from the force and moved to West Virginia. His current whereabouts are unknown. Sarah Jenkins, one of the few living relatives of the original Millfield victims, shared this account during a 2022 interview. "My great-grandfather was William Taft, the schoolteacher who went missing that day. Family legend says he actually returned 3 days after the others, but he was different. He would sit for hours staring at blank walls, sketching the same house over and over. He told my great-grandmother that he had been inside and that it wasn't finished yet. But it would be. A month later, he disappeared again, this time for good. The night he vanished, every mirror in their house shattered simultaneously. My great-grandmother always claimed that in the seconds before the glass broke, she saw her husband's reflection, but he was standing in a grand hallway with a spiral staircase, not in their modest home. As for the concrete chamber where the 7 skeletons were found, it too presents an ongoing mystery. After the remains were removed for analysis, the chamber was sealed and the construction project abandoned. In 2015, a routine survey of the site revealed something impossible. The chamber, which had been filled with concrete and sealed, was empty again. The concrete fill had vanished, leaving the same seamless room, now containing only a single wooden chair, placed precisely in the center. No explanation has ever been found for how the concrete was removed from a sealed underground chamber with no entrance or exit. The site has since been designated a restricted area by the federal government. Security cameras monitor the location 24 hours a day, though footage from the first several years is said to show a peculiar anomaly. At exactly 3:33 a.m. on October 17th of each year, the cameras record nothing but static for precisely 17 minutes. The most recent development in this century-long mystery came just last month, when a real estate listing appeared briefly online before being removed. It advertised an historic Victorian estate for sale in Athens County, with an open house scheduled for October 17, 2025. The listing included a single photograph of a magnificent mansion with a central dome and triangular attic windows. Despite the image's high resolution and modern digital format, architectural experts who examined it concluded that the house couldn't possibly exist. Its dimensions were mathematically impossible, with angles that couldn't occur in 3-dimensional space. The listing agent was named as Blackwood Sisters Realty. The contact information led to a non-existent address and a disconnected phone number. But most disturbing of all was the property's listed price. Exactly $100 earnest money, with the full price to be determined at auction. For those in the rural communities of Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, the legend of the Blackwood Triplets and their impossible house has become something of a local boogeyman story. Parents warn children not to follow strangers into the fog. Real estate transactions involving 3 identical women are viewed with paralyzing fear, and on foggy October mornings, people avoid the wooded areas where the boundaries between here and elsewhere might grow thin enough to glimpse what waits on the other side. As the 100th anniversary of the original Millfield incident approaches, local authorities have already begun preparing. Extra officers will be on duty throughout the region on October 17th, 2031. They'll be watching for 3 identical women with copper-red hair and pale blue eyes. They'll be monitoring real estate listings and auction announcements, and they'll be ready to warn anyone who shows interest in a magnificent Victorian mansion that seems too good to be true. Because some houses are never built with wood and stone. Some are constructed from desperation and belief, from desire and dream. And some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. If you find yourself on a foggy October morning, approached by 3 identical women offering to show you a property not on any map, remember the 17 who never returned from viewing a house that never existed. Remember that some prices are far higher than money, and remember that some dwellings are not meant for the living. From a journal page found pinned to the door of Detective Sullivan's abandoned home in 2024. I've seen it. God help me, I've seen it. It's beautiful and wrong, like an Escher drawing made real. The proportions shift when you try to focus on them. The triplets were in the attic windows again, but this time I recognized them. They aren't the same women returning every 30 years. They're the same souls wearing new flesh. The house requires them 3 to maintain the symmetry, 3 to open the doors. I followed the blueprint I found, built a scale model exactly to the specifications. I thought it would help me understand. Instead, it opened something. Last night I woke to find myself standing before the model, but it wasn't small anymore, or maybe I was smaller. I could see inside it. The circular room had 7 chairs now. 6 of them filled. The 7th was empty, waiting. They saw me watching, all of them, the original victims, the triplets. They turned and looked up at me as if I were a giant peering in through the roof. Then one of the triplets, Eleanor, I think, pointed at the empty chair and smiled. She beckoned me to join them. I'm leaving everything behind. My notes, my badge, all of it. I've burned the model, but it's too late. I can see the house now, even when I close my eyes. It's calling me. But I won't go to the 7th chair. Instead, I'm going to find the real site, the original foundation. There must be a way to tear it down before it becomes complete. If anyone reads this, the auction isn't for the house. The house is auctioning US. The journal ends there. Detective Sullivan's body was found 3 months later at the site of the original Millfield disappearances. The autopsy listed his cause of death as exposure, though it occurred during a summer heat wave. His body was discovered inside a perfect circle of frost that had formed despite the 90-degree temperatures. In his hand was clutched an architectural drawing showing the completed mansion. X-ray analysis revealed that the drawing had been tattooed on the inside of his skin, invisible from the surface. As for the Blackwood triplets, their true identities remain unknown. No records exist of 3 identical girls, born in the years preceding any of their appearances. It's as if they materialize fully formed, ageless and identical, whenever they are needed. The house that never existed continues to claim victims. It continues to build itself, one believer at a time. And somewhere, in a place just beyond the corner of your eye, its doors stand open, waiting. If you're reading this, consider it a warning. The next auction is approaching. The house is nearly complete, and the Blackwood sisters are looking for just a few more qualified buyers. Always remember that the only true protection in this world comes from faith. Turn to God and Jesus Christ for guidance through the darkness, for even the most terrible earthly horrors cannot touch a soul protected by divine light. It was Dr. Amelia Carter, a professor of architectural history at Ohio State University, who first noticed the pattern. In 2013, while researching Depression-era housing trends, she stumbled upon newspaper clippings about the Millfield incident. What caught her attention wasn't the disappearances themselves, but the description of the house in the auction notices. The proportions described are architecturally significant, she wrote in her journal. The exact ratio between the height of the central dome and the width of the foundation occurs repeatedly in certain occult architectural traditions dating back to ancient Mesopotamia. These dimensions were believed to create resonant spaces, buildings that served as conduits between worlds rather than mere shelters. Dr. Carter began collecting similar cases, creating a database of incidents involving identical triplet women and missing persons connected to non-existent properties. What emerged was a disturbing pattern spanning nearly 2 centuries across the American Midwest, always concentrated in economically depressed regions where desperation ran high. These incidents are not random, she noted. They follow ley lines, ancient pathways of mystical energy that crisscross the landscape. Every location where the triplets have appeared sits at the intersection of at least 3 such lines. Millfield, Ohio, had 7 intersecting lines, the most powerful convergence in my data set. In 2015, Dr. Carter published her findings in an obscure academic journal. 3 days later, she disappeared from her campus office. Security footage showed her leaving with 3 women whose faces were never visible to the camera. She hasn't been seen since. Her research notes were found scattered across her office floor. On the wall, written in what forensic analysis would confirm was her own handwriting, were the words, "I understand now. The house isn't being built. It's being summoned." The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit briefly investigated the Carter disappearance as a possible kidnapping, but with no ransom demands and no signs of struggle, the case soon went cold. However, one agent, Special Agent Diana Reeves, continued to pursue the connection between Dr. Carter's research and the historical Blackwood Triplets case. Reeves's unofficial investigation led her to interview Sarah Jenkins, the descendant of William Taft. Jenkins shared a family heirloom she had never shown the previous investigators, a set of architectural drawings allegedly created by her great-grandfather during the month between his return and his second disappearance. "The drawings aren't just of a house," Reeves wrote in her personal case notes. "They're more like anatomical studies. The house is depicted as if it were a living organism, with systems analogous to circulation and respiration. Most disturbing are the annotations in Taft's handwriting, referring to feeding chambers and digestion cycles. If I'm interpreting these correctly, the structure doesn't just house occupants, it consumes them." Reeves expanded her investigation, connecting Dr. Carter's disappearance to similar cases involving academics who had researched the Blackwood incidents. Over the past century, 17 researchers had vanished after delving too deeply into the case. In each instance, security cameras or witness reports mentioned the presence of 3 identical women shortly before the disappearance. In 2019, Reeves took a leave of absence from the FBI and traveled to the site of the original Millfield incident. She set up a small camp in the woods and began her own excavation, searching for any physical evidence that might remain after nearly 90 years. On her 4th day of digging, Reeves uncovered something unusual, a small metal box containing a series of glass photographic plates. The images, once developed, showed the construction of a foundation for a large building. The location appeared to be the very site where Reeves was digging, though the surrounding landscape in the photos was noticeably different, with fewer trees and different topography. Most striking were the figures captured in the photographs, dozens of men and women in period clothing from the 1870s, working on the foundation. Their faces showed expressions of rapturous joy despite the hard labor. And overseeing the work were 3 identical women in black dresses. The final plate in the series showed something impossible: the completed Victorian mansion standing proudly on the site, its windows aglow with warm light. But superimposed over this image, as if double exposed, was another photograph of the same location showing nothing but empty forest. On the back of this plate was an inscription: "The house as it exists in possibility, superimposed over the house as it exists in actuality. The convergence approaches." Next attempt, 1891. Reeves documented her findings in a detailed report, which she encrypted and scheduled for automated release to several colleagues if she failed to check in within 72 hours. The report included this haunting speculation: "I believe we're dealing with an entity that exists partially outside our dimension, attempting to fully manifest in our reality. The triplets are its agents, or possibly aspects of the entity itself. The house is its physical form, but it cannot fully materialize without sufficient psychic energy, specifically the energy generated by desperate hope and desire. This explains why the triplets target economically depressed areas. People in desperate circumstances are more willing to believe in impossible opportunities. Their collective belief, their desperate wanting, generates the energy the entity needs to strengthen its foothold in our dimension. The 30-year cycle likely corresponds to some cosmic alignment that weakens the barriers between dimensions. The triplets appear during these windows of opportunity, harvesting belief and occasionally sacrificing true believers who serve as anchors for the manifestation. Most disturbing is what happens to those who disappear. The architectural drawings suggest they become part of the house itself, not just trapped inside it, but incorporated into its very structure. The house isn't just being built, it's growing, using human consciousness as its building material. Reeves never returned from her expedition. Her camp was found abandoned, her equipment scattered as if by a violent wind. The metal box and photographic plates were missing. The only evidence of what might have happened was a trail of barefoot prints in the soil, 3 sets of identical female footprints approaching her tent, and a single set of Reeves' boot prints leading away into the forest, stopping abruptly at the edge of a small clearing. At that exact spot, investigators found a single concrete post that hadn't been there during previous searches of the area. Embedded in the concrete was a small brass plate bearing the name Diana Reeves, Witness to the Foundation, 2019. The most compelling evidence supporting Reeves's theory came from an unexpected source. In 2020, a physics laboratory at Princeton University detected an anomalous energy signature emanating from the region of the original Millfield site. Dr. Howard Chen, lead researcher on the project, described the phenomenon. "We've been mapping quantum fluctuations across the eastern United States, looking for naturally occurring deviations that might be useful in developing stable quantum computing. What we found in the Ohio-West Virginia border region is unprecedented, a persistent quantum superposition spanning approximately 1 square mile, centered on what our maps identify as former Millfield Township. In layman's terms, it's as if 2 different realities are attempting to occupy the same space simultaneously. Our instruments detect a physical structure with the mass and dimensions of a large building, but visual observation shows nothing but forest. It's as if the building exists in a state of quantum uncertainty, both there and not there at the same time." Dr. Chen's team established a permanent monitoring station near the site, recording fluctuations in the anomaly. Their data revealed something alarming. The superposition was slowly collapsing towards certainty. The phantom structure was becoming more real with each passing month. "If current trends continue," Chen wrote in his final report, "the superposition will fully collapse into our reality by October 17, 2031, exactly 100 years after the original Millfield incident. At that point, whatever exists in that quantum state will fully materialize in our dimension. God help us all if what materializes is what the data suggests. A structure with impossible geometries that violate the fundamental laws of physics." Dr. Chen never completed his research. In April of 2021, he and his entire research team vanished during a routine visit to the monitoring station. Satellite imagery captured the moment of their disappearance, a sudden fog emerging from nowhere, enveloping the site for 17 minutes, then dissipating to reveal an empty clearing. The monitoring equipment was gone, as were Chen and his 7 team members. In their place stood a perfect 1/8 scale model of a Victorian mansion, exact in every detail down to tiny human figures visible through the windows. Authorities who responded to the scene reported that the model was warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate slightly, as if humming with energy. Before it could be properly documented or removed for analysis, a second fog bank rolled in. When it cleared, the model was gone. In its place was a concrete post identical to the one found at the site of Reeves' disappearance. The brass plate on this post read, "Howard Chen and Team, Witnesses to the Walls, 2021. The pattern was becoming clear. The house was not only manifesting, it was documenting its own construction, marking each phase with the names of those it had consumed to achieve it. This brings us to the present day and the most disturbing development yet. 3 weeks ago, on October 7th, 2025, 3 identical women with copper-red hair and pale blue eyes appeared simultaneously in 7 different towns across Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. In each location, they established temporary real estate offices and began advertising the auction of a historically significant Victorian estate to be held on October 17th. Unlike previous iterations, these women made no attempt to hide their activities. They gave interviews to local newspapers, appeared on regional morning shows, and maintained active social media accounts promoting the auction. When questioned about the property's location, they provided the same answer in each town. The house exists at the crossroads of desire and possibility. Only those who truly wish to see it will be able to find it. Most alarming was their response when a reporter in Charleston, West Virginia, asked directly about the historical Blackwood Triplets case and the pattern of disappearances. The woman smiled serenely and replied, "We are not the Blackwoods, we are the house. We have always been the house. For 100 years, we have been building ourselves in your world, room by room, life by life. On October 17th, the final cornerstone will be laid. The doors will open permanently, and all who have contributed to our construction will live again within our walls." The interview went viral, viewed millions of times over the following days. Authorities attempted to locate and question the women, but they seemed to vanish whenever law enforcement approached, only to appear hours later in another town, continuing their promotion of the auction. The FBI established a task force to investigate, led by Special Agent Marcus Thorne, who had been a close colleague of the missing Agent Reeves. Thorne issued a public warning, advising people to avoid any contact with the women and to report sightings immediately. Despite these warnings, interest in the auction grew. The mysterious nature of the house, combined with the triplets' claim that it would only be visible to those who truly wished to see it, created a perverse fascination among the public. Social media filled with speculation and amateur investigations. Several popular paranormal YouTube channels announced plans to attend the auction and live-stream the event. Most concerning to authorities was the triplets' new approach to deposits. Rather than requesting monetary payments, they asked interested parties to sign a document titled Deed of Intention, which included the statement, "I freely offer my belief in the house that waits between. With this intention, I anchor its reality to this world." Handwriting analysts who examined copies of these documents noted something impossible. The signature line seemed to draw ink from the signer's pen with unusual force, often causing pens to run dry after a single signature. Microscopic examination revealed that the paper fibers at the signature line had a crystalline structure more similar to biological material than wood pulp. "They're not collecting money anymore," Agent Thorne wrote in his report. "They're harvesting belief directly, and it's working. Our surveillance indicates that over 3,000 people across the 7 target towns have signed these documents in the past 2 weeks. That's 3,000 anchors tethering this impossible house to our reality." As October 17th approaches, a tense atmosphere has settled over the region. Federal authorities have established a perimeter around the original Millfield site, though satellite monitoring shows unusual disturbances in the area, equipment malfunctions, unexplained fog banks, and brief periods where the coordinates seem to show an entirely different landscape superimposed over the forest. Last night, exactly 1 week before the scheduled auction, residents within a 50-mile radius of the Millfield site reported an unusual phenomenon. At precisely 3:33 a.m., every mirror in the region briefly showed the same image: the interior of a grand Victorian hallway with a spiral staircase, where countless people stood motionless, their eyes closed as if sleeping. Among them were recognizable figures: Dr. Amelia Carter, Special Agent Diana Reeves, Dr. Howard Chen and his team, and dozens of others connected to the century-long mystery. At the top of the staircase, visible in every mirror, stood 3 identical women with copper-red hair. They appeared to be looking directly at the viewers, their pale eyes reflecting a light source not visible in the image. Their lips moved in unison, speaking words that thousands of witnesses independently reported as, "The foundation is laid, the walls have risen, the roof is sealed. All that remains is for the doors to open. We invite you to the housewarming. October 17, 3:33 p.m. The address is in your heart. You already know the way." The images vanished after exactly 17 seconds, leaving ordinary reflections behind. But in hundreds of homes across the region, Residents reported finding a change in their mirrors afterwards, a tiny etching in the corner of the glass showing a simple house symbol with 7 dots arranged in a circle inside it. The most recently discovered piece of evidence comes from William Taft's great-granddaughter, Sarah Jenkins. While searching through family heirlooms after the mirror incident, she discovered a hidden compartment in an old writing desk that had belonged to her great-grandfather. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed, "To whoever finds this when the house is complete." The letter inside, authenticated as being in Taft's handwriting, contained this warning: "If you are reading this, then a century has passed since I was taken, and the house is ready to fully enter your world." What we thought was a confidence scheme was actually a ritual of manifestation. The triplets were never human. They are projections, fingers of the house reaching into our world to pull itself through. The house exists in what occultists call the between place, a dimension adjacent to our own, where thought becomes substance. It has been growing there for millennia, feeding on human desire and desperation. Every 30 years, the veil between dimensions thins, allowing it to reach through and anchor itself more firmly to our reality. Those of us who disappeared that day in 1931 didn't die. We were converted, our physical bodies transmuted into architectural elements, our consciousness absorbed into the house's awareness. I exist now as a section of hallway connecting the eastern wing to the central dome. Eleanor Blackwood, or the entity we knew by that name, told me this was an honor. "Most houses are built with dead wood and cold stone," she said. "Ours lives. Every brick thinks, every floorboard feels, every window remembers." I've learned the house's true purpose during my imprisonment here. It is not merely trying to exist in our world. It intends to convert our world into an extension of itself. The auction on October 17, 2031 will not be a sale. It will be a consecration. Every person who voluntarily enters the house on that day will serve as a conduit, widening the doorway between dimensions until the boundaries dissolve completely. There is only one way to stop it. The house's manifestation requires symmetry, 3 guides to lead, 7 anchors to secure. Break that symmetry, and the ritual fails. One of the triplets must be prevented from appearing. One of the 7 anchor points must be destroyed. I've managed to identify the 7 anchor points from within the house, 7 concrete posts placed at equidistant intervals around the original Millfield site, each containing a brass plate naming those sacrificed to create it. Destroy even one of these posts before the final auction, and the house cannot fully materialize. But beware, the house knows its vulnerabilities and will defend them. It can manipulate perception, create fog and confusion, and even temporarily alter the landscape to prevent anyone from approaching the anchor points. Worst of all, it can appear as your heart's desire, tempting you to cross its threshold voluntarily. Remember this: no matter what you see, no matter what you're offered, no matter who seems to be calling you from inside, do not enter the house willingly. Once you cross that threshold, you become part of its architecture, forever. The letter ended with a crude map showing the approximate locations of the 7 anchor points around the former Millfield township. Agent Thorne immediately dispatched teams to these coordinates, but initial reports are troubling. The teams describe a landscape that seems to shift and change as they approach the designated areas. Paths that circle back on themselves despite maintaining a straight course, and sudden fog banks that materialize in otherwise clear weather. Most disturbing are the reports of what the teams hear in these fog banks, voices of missing loved ones, colleagues and friends, calling for help from somewhere just out of sight. 3 agents have already disappeared after reporting they could see lights in the fog and moving to investigate. As of this recording, with less than 24 hours until the announced auction time, federal authorities have established a command center near the Millfield site. All civilians within a 10-mile radius have been evacuated, though many have expressed unusual reluctance to leave. describing a powerful sense that they're supposed to be here tomorrow. Agent Thorne's latest communication suggests the situation may be even worse than feared. The house isn't just manifesting at the original site. We're getting reports of partial manifestations at all 7 auction locations simultaneously. Witnesses describe seeing the outline of a Victorian mansion shimmer into existence for brief moments before fading again. These manifestations are becoming more solid and lasting longer with each occurrence. Most alarming is what our quantum sensors are detecting. The energy signature Dr. Chen identified has expanded exponentially in the past 24 hours. It now encompasses all 7 towns where the Triplets established their offices. It's as if the house is trying to materialize, not just in one location, but in 7 simultaneously. Or worse, it's trying to merge all 7 locations into one, folding space around itself. God help us. I think we're already too late. This isn't just a haunting or a dimensional incursion. It's a complete rewriting of reality centered around this house, and the only ones who might know how to stop it are already inside it. Agent Thorne's final transmission came 3 hours ago. He had approached one of the anchor points alone after his entire team became disoriented in a sudden fog bank. His body camera footage shows him reaching a small clearing where a concrete post stands. As he examines the brass plate on the post, the camera captures a reflection in the polished metal, 3 identical women standing behind him. Thorne turns, but the women aren't visible in the direct camera view, only in the reflection. His voice remains steady as he addresses them. I know what you are. I know what the house is doing. You can't have this world. A woman's voice responds, though no speakers are visible on camera. We already have it, Agent Thorne. The auction is just a formality. The house has always been here, waiting. Your kind built it with your longing, your desperate desire for something better, something more. Every time someone looked at their mundane life and wished for something grander, they added a brick to our walls. Every dream of a perfect home, every fantasy of escape, all of it constructed our reality. The footage shows Thorne reaching for his sidearm, but freezing mid-motion. The camera tilts upward as he seems to be lifted off his feet by an unseen force. His final words are calm, almost resigned. Diana was right. You're not selling the house. The house is buying us. The footage ends with a brief glimpse of something impossible. The camera seems to pass through a solid wall, revealing an ornate Victorian interior. Dozens of people stand motionless in a grand hallway, their eyes closed, their bodies partially transparent, as if they're caught between states of existence. Among them are recognizable faces: Dr. Carter, Agent Reeves, Dr. Chen and his team, and now Agent Thorne. This brings us to the present moment. With less than 12 hours remaining until the scheduled auction, emergency broadcasts are advising residents across the 7-state region to avoid all mirrors, reflective surfaces, and fog banks until further notice. Military personnel have established perimeters around each of the 7 auction sites, though reports indicate they're having difficulty maintaining these positions due to spatial anomalies and perceptual disruptions. Most concerning are the thousands of people who seem to be sleepwalking toward these locations, despite the warnings and barricades. They move with purpose but appear unaware of their surroundings, many still in nightclothes, all describing the same experience when temporarily detained, a dream of being invited to a housewarming party at the most beautiful home they've ever seen. The latest satellite imagery from the Millfield site shows something that defies explanation, a perfect circle of altered reality approximately 1 mile in diameter. Within this circle, the forest has vanished, replaced by a manicured Victorian-era landscape surrounding a massive mansion that appears to flicker in and out of existence, becoming more solid with each manifestation. Most alarming is what the imaging reveals about the mansion's dimensions. According to analysis, the structure's internal measurements are physically impossible. The interior spaces appear to be substantially larger than the exterior dimensions would allow. Some rooms seem to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, while others appear to contain landscapes that couldn't possibly fit within the building. As for the Blackwood triplets, they've made one final public statement, broadcast simultaneously across all television channels, radio stations, and internet platforms within the affected region just 1 hour ago. The waiting is almost over. For 100 years, we have prepared this place for you. A house built not of wood and stone, but of hope and desire. A house where the rules of your limited world no longer apply. A house where all things are possible. Tomorrow at 3:33 p.m., the doors will open permanently. All are welcome, all are needed. The house that waits between will wait no longer. It will become the house that is, the house that always was, the house that will be all. Bring nothing but yourselves. The house provides everything else. Forever. The broadcast ended with 17 seconds of footage showing the mansion's grand entrance, massive double doors of dark wood beneath a triangular pediment. The doors appear to be opening slowly, revealing a warm golden light from within and the silhouettes of countless people standing in the entrance hall, their arms outstretched in welcome. Facial recognition software has identified many of these silhouettes as missing persons connected to the century-long mystery, including some who disappeared as far back as 1871. They appear unchanged, exactly as they looked at the time of their disappearance, frozen in a moment that has lasted over a century. As the doors open wider in the footage, something else becomes visible beyond the entrance hall. Not more rooms, but an endless landscape of impossible architecture stretching to infinity. Hallways that bend at impossible angles, staircases that ascend into the sky, rooms that float unsupported in space, all connected to form a structure that resembles a city more than a house, all built in the same ornate Victorian style. The final frame shows the doors fully open and a figure emerging, a woman with copper-red hair. But unlike the triplets, this woman's features are constantly shifting, as if multiple faces are superimposed over one another. Her eyes, however, remain constant, pale blue, reflecting a light source that isn't visible in the image. Her lips move to form words that have been translated by expert lip readers as, "The house is complete. Now we begin building the world." This concludes our current information on the Millfield mystery and the house that waits between. Federal authorities continue to monitor the situation and coordinate evacuation efforts across the affected region. All civilians are advised to avoid the 7 identified manifestation sites and to report any unusual phenomena, particularly architectural hallucinations or sightings of identical triplet women. Remember, no matter what you see or hear, no matter how compelling the invitation might be, do not approach any structure resembling a Victorian mansion that wasn't there before. Do not sign any documents related to property sales or auctions in the affected areas. And above all, do not cross the threshold of any doorway that seems to lead somewhere impossible. The auction ends at sunset tomorrow. Pray that when darkness falls, we still recognize the world it falls upon. A final note found in Sarah Jenkins' home this morning, in handwriting matching her great-grandfather's century-old letter. The cornerstone is laid. The foundation is set. The walls have risen. The roof is sealed. The windows watch. The doors open. The house is hungry. But even the darkest dwelling cannot stand against the light of true faith. In your darkest hour, remember that earthly structures, no matter how impossible, cannot touch the soul that shelters in divine protection. Turn to God and Jesus Christ, for they are the only true refuge when the houses built by desire reveal their true foundations. The house that waits between feeds on desperation and unfulfilled desire. But it cannot consume those who have found fulfillment in faith. Its doors only open to those who choose to enter. Its windows only reflect what you wish to see. Look away, walk away, pray away the shadows it casts. For some dwellings are built to shelter and others are built to consume. Know the difference before you cross the threshold. Sarah Jenkins herself is now missing. Her home was found empty this morning with no signs of struggle or forced entry. The only unusual element was discovered in her bedroom. All the mirrors had been covered with black cloth, and a circle of salt surrounded her bed. On her bedside table lay an open Bible, bookmarked to Ecclesiastes 7, verse 27. "This is what I have found," says the teacher, adding one thing to another to discover the scheme of things. And beneath the Bible, a hand-drawn map marking the location of a small church 17 miles from the original Millfield site, with the notation, "The only safe house when the auction begins." As the final hours count down to 3:33 p.m. tomorrow, this reporter will continue monitoring the situation from the established safe distance. For those within the affected region who cannot evacuate in time, authorities recommend seeking shelter in houses of worship, which preliminary reports suggest may be resistant to the spatial distortions affecting other structures. Remember, in the words of William Taft, passed down through generations, houses are built by hands, but homes are built by hearts. Know the difference, and you may yet survive when the house that waits between finally arrives. May God protect us all when the auction begins and the house that never existed finally opens its doors.